everybody and welcome. I have just gotten back from my honeymoon in Japan and it was 2 weeks of just absolute bliss. It was wonderful. And for both my husband and I think it was a trip of a lifetime and I feel so fortunate to have been able to go. And in this video I'd like to show you all of the fabric shopping that I got up to because I had only planned on going to one shop in particular that I knew about ahead of time, and I ended up finding 3 additional shops that I wanted to share with you because they were all very interesting and had lots to offer, and I also wanted to show you everything that I bought because I found some really cool notions and some really beautiful fabric. But before we begin, if you're new here, my name is Sarah and I am a dual French and American citizen. I grew up in the United States and I've been living and working in France since 2009 and I share my sewing projects and sometimes I dabble in other creative pursuits such as embroidery or knitting, and sometimes I share a little bit of my personal life as well to show you what inspires me in case it inspires you too, so welcome. I'm still a little bit jet lagged, but I wanted to share all the details before I forget. And there are 4 addresses I wanted to show you today, so let's get right to it. So we spent our entire 2 weeks in Kyushu, which is the southernmost island in the main chain of islands of Japan, and we first flew into Fukuoka. And we were almost on time to see a little bit of the Hakata Dontaku Festival, which is the biggest annual festival in Fukuoka, full of celebrations and dancing in the street, and everybody's out and celebrating, and it would have been so cool to see that. But we got there too late. We were originally supposed to arrive around 6 p.m., but our flight times were changed and we arrived around 10 p.m. So all the festivities were over, but that's okay because on our way to our hotel in the taxi we heard traditional Japanese music, and the taxi driver pointed out to us that there was a dance festival going on, or a dance competition of traditional Japanese dance going on just around the corner from our hotel. So we rallied in our jet-lagged states and we went and we watched a little bit of it, and it was so cool. So I'm really happy we were able to catch even that just little bit. That was a lot of fun to watch and to listen to. And so we explored Fukuoka for 3 days and we were able to walk around, go to the top of the Fukuoka Tower for some great views. We had some Hakata ramen as well, which is delicious. It's my favorite kind of ramen. And we were even able to do some ceramic doll painting at a doll shop in central Fukuoka, and that was a lot of fun. But then on the last day, we went to this address that I had noted down. It's a fabric shop, and it's a pretty big fabric shop in Fukuoka. It wasn't too far from our hotel room, so I was able to go and explore for about an hour while my husband busied himself elsewhere, as he usually does. And it was really cool to see because they had a really great selection of lots of different kinds of fabrics. They had lots of patterns as well and lots of notions. But since it was the very beginning of the trip and I wasn't sure how much I could buy at the beginning and I didn't want to weigh myself down too much at the very beginning, I limited what I bought at that time because I knew that I was coming back to Fukuoka for the last night before we left, and that I'd be able to come back to this shop and pick up anything that I wanted to if I had enough space in my suitcase on the way back. And so for my very first purchases, I found 3 different cuts of fabric. So there were 2 that were already pre-cut. Let me open these for you. It's this really beautiful, almost like a double gauze, but 1 layer. It's kind of that sort of gauzy weave feel to it, like an opener, or more open opener, a more open weave to it. And let's see if I can show you this way. And it's got this really beautiful sort of texture to it, and I love this color. I've been getting a lot more into pinks and mauves, especially a little bit more purpley but more mauve, and I've been wanting to wear a little bit more. I think it suits my coloring pretty well. And yeah, I found 2 cuts of 2 meters of this fabric, so 1 in this mauve color and then a second one in this light blue, sort of a powdery gray blue, and it's really beautiful. It's got the same texture to it. And I'm thinking, I'm not entirely sure what I want to make with the blue one yet, but I love blue, so I will find a use for it. The last fabric I found goes really well with this one. So this is a designer fabric made in Japan. Let me find the designer. Let's see, it's written on the selvage here. You Alive Life Collection, made in Japan. I didn't take a picture of the tag, so I'm not entirely sure what the fiber content is. It's this really beautiful sort of floral. It's got pinks and blues and this sort of bluish Bordeaux sort of background. My husband doesn't like this one. He usually doesn't like anything with a flowered print or anything, but he shares his opinion freely with me. But I like it. And in the shop they had made a bag out of it, so that's an option. But I think what I really want to do, because I think it pairs really, really well with this fabric, is make some kind of top, like a sleeveless summer top with a square neckline that's not too tight, and then wear it with this as a skirt. I think that that would be fabulous and really, really beautiful and breathable and lovely. Maybe a tiered skirt out of this lighter cotton fabric. But yeah, I really like these two together, and even though that immediately took up some space in my suitcase, I knew that these three were good buys. And then while we were there, my husband had a minor wardrobe crisis on his favorite pair of shorts. The button came off, and so luckily I was there with him, and so I got these size 5 for sort of cotton canvas or thicker fabrics needle, because I didn't bring a kit with me. I didn't think it was necessary. Silly me. And some button thread. So these two, I got these, and this is a special thread for buttons, so I won't be putting it with my other thread, like machine thread, but I think it's going to be useful in the future as well. And I really love these needles. I was sewing it onto the button, onto his shorts, and it was just so easy, so I'm really glad that that prompted me to buy these, because I usually wouldn't buy sort of a canvas or thicker needle. I was thinking more lighter silks or cottons to buy, but yeah, that was useful and will be useful in the future. So then the second city that we went to after Fukuoka was Kumamoto, which is about an hour south of Fukuoka. It was between you couldn't see the ocean from the city, but you could feel it in the air, and there were these mountain ranges, and the city was kind of located in the valley, and we had clear blue skies and clear views of the mountain ranges, and it was just beautiful. And I fell in love with this city. I think it was my favorite city of all the cities that we visited during this trip. Not only because the people were friendly and it was a beautiful city, but also it's the third most populated city in Kyushu, but it felt more compact than other cities that we visited. In Japan, a lot of the cities are very spread out. This one felt like it had a downtown, and it felt like there was a lot of life going on. Like, we saw all kinds of people and not just one kind of person. Often your neighborhoods where there's only business people or there's only high schoolers after school hanging out by a mall. Here it felt like there were all kinds of people in all kinds of situations in life, walking around, living, sort of sharing the same space, and it had more of a convivial feeling to it. And I really like cities like that, especially in Japan. And we had a lot of fun exploring this city. It had a really beautiful castle and gardens, and I fell in love with the city mascot, Kumamon. This little guy was everywhere, and he brought me such joy. A little bit derpy, a little bit weird, but also joyous at the same time. So yeah, I had to bring him home with me in a few different accessories. And what was really cool was on the very first evening we had arrived and were exploring downtown Kumamoto. We were exploring the arcade shopping streets of the city, and I came across a sewing shop. This shop was small but packed with really beautiful fabrics, especially natural fiber fabrics, and really interesting notions. So I took my time in this shop. Luckily there were other shops for my husband to enjoy while I was in here. I loved exploring the shop, and the personnel there were also very, very friendly. Not very many people spoke English in Kumamoto, but they greeted me with a big smile and konnichiwa, and they were very patient with me in my baby Japanese, and so I felt welcome, and I had a really good time in the shop. I think this is my favorite as well, which contributes to my experience of Kumamoto in general, and I highly recommend checking this one out. And while in that shop, I found one really beautiful fabric that I wanted to buy, and it was this one. It's a medium weight cotton with sort of an off-white background and then a really dark blue embroidery thread, and the thread is kind of like a sashiko style, as in it's more visible on the right side than the wrong side. Like, the spaces in between the stitches are smaller than the stitches themselves, and it's just, if I hold it closer maybe you can see, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I love the texture and the weight, and it's just really, really beautiful. And so I'm not entirely sure what I want to make with it yet. I'm thinking maybe a sew-over Lottie dress, but I do have something similar of that pattern, so maybe something else. I only have a meter, so I'll have to be careful. But yeah, I thought this was really, really beautiful, and so I got this one. And then for the rest, I got some notions. I found some really beautiful buttons that they had there. Let me show you, let's see. maybe if I put it here, they're these really beautiful blue, and I got them in 2 different sizes. So this larger size for maybe a skirt, and then also this tiny size for maybe a shirt button. I thought that was really, really beautiful. Because it's such a marbled sort of blue color, it just really appealed to me, and so I got that. And then I also found they had cuts of lace fabric, and I thought that the lace was really, really pretty. I think it's polyester. I'm not sure. It might be cotton. No, I think it's polyester, but it's not stretch. I'm not sure what I'm going to use it for, but I thought it was really, really nice, and I wanted to get it, so I wanted to try making something with that soon. And then I also picked up a ruler. I love Japanese rulers, and I like working in centimeters and the metric system in general for measures, not for temperature. But this one is, let's see if I can, but this one is 1 centimeter wide and 15 centimeters long, and I've seen it in videos before used for pattern adjusting or modifying or drafting, and I thought it would be really useful to have for marking seam allowances, for example. And so I picked this one up. And then the last thing I got was sashiko needles. I took a sashiko beginner course about a month ago, and I made this one with the Asanoha, I think it's called, pattern. Oh, the color is going weird, but and I really want to continue doing it because I really enjoy this method, and that was a really fun thing to do. So I thought, where else but in Japan to pick up sashiko needles? I know I can find them in Paris here, but I wanted to get exactly the right ones, and how cool to be able to buy it in Japan as well. It was really cheap anyway, so yeah, that was pretty cool to find. I really enjoyed visiting that shop. The people were very, very friendly, and the selection was really interesting, and it just added to how much I enjoyed Kumamoto. And if you are going to Kyushu, I highly recommend checking out that city. It was one of my favorite experiences during the trip. And then for the third part of our trip, we headed further south to Kagoshima, which is along the southern edge of Kyushu. And on our first night, we found the most delicious Odin restaurant in a very traditional style, sort of Japanese restaurant type, which is when you're seated sort of facing other patrons and the cook is in the middle, and there were about 8 seats max on the ground floor. It's a very small building with very old sort of wooden details to it. And it was located in an older part of the city in the teeny tiny little avenues with lots of little restaurants hidden inside. And we had the most amazing evening. We did spend a day exploring Kagoshima, but the other 2 days we spent exploring the volcano island of Sakurajima. It's about a 15-minute ferry ride from the port of Kagoshima, and we spent a day renting bikes and biking around, just a quarter of it because to do the whole thing would have been too much for me. I'm not a biker. But it was beautiful, and the people were so friendly, and the volcano had definitely personality, and we had the most amazing day. I think that was one of my favorite days of the trip. And then we also spent a day and a night in Ibusuki, which is on the very southernmost tip of Kyushu, and it is called, what I learned, the Hawaii of Japan, and it did feel quite tropical. Lots of butterflies, and that was just so amazing. It's a resort town. We got to try the sand baths, so the hot sand warmed by the volcanic activity just underneath the surface of the ground, and that was really cool. But in Kagoshima, I didn't find any sewing specific shops. I'm sure there were some, but I didn't find them. But I did find a shop called Marimeko, or Marimeko. I thought it was Japanese, but it turns out that it's a Finnish designer. But I was convinced it was Japanese for a while because it was everywhere in Japan. I think because Uniqlo just did a collaboration with Marimeko, or Marimeko. And so I was seeing it everywhere, but anyway, it was a really cool shop. All of the colors were really cool to see in person, especially the different fabrics and things. And so I picked up a small cut because it was very expensive. I think I have about half a meter of this cut of this fabric in the Marimeko design. And the sales assistant told me that this one was a Japan exclusive print. So how cool. So I had to pick this one up. I think that's what she said. We were communicating in sort of broken English and Japanese, and she was very friendly too, so that was a lovely experience. But yeah, I'm thinking of making because I only have about half a meter, I'm thinking of making a cushion cover with this one, and I think that'll be fun to create because I haven't made anything for the house like upholstery-wise in a long time. It's not something I usually do, and yeah, I think this design is pretty cool. And then the last leg of our trip was in Beppu, which is on the northeastern side of Kyushu. We were spending 3 days there, and Beppu is known as being one of the biggest onsen resort towns or cities in Japan. It has a lot of hot spring sources and onsen everywhere, so that's definitely something that we were able to do all over Kyushu, and a lot. I got used to taking at least one bath a night in the natural hot springs, and oh, how lovely. And because that city is more of a resort town and rest and relaxation, it wasn't very populated with Japanese people who lived there. I mean, it was still a pretty big city, but we found downtown pretty empty. We couldn't find the soul of the city, even though there were lots of touristy things to do. And so I didn't find any sewing shops in Beppu, but we did spend half a day in Yufuin, which is a countryside resort town about an hour west of Beppu. And it was really beautiful, but pretty touristy, so we didn't stay more than half a day. And then we went to Oita, just sort of on a whim, to spend the rest of the day in Oita before going back to Beppu. And Oita is right next to Beppu, but it is really populated, and it felt a lot more like Kumamoto in that there was life and commerce and art and people, and we had a lot of fun just walking around for a few hours. And in Oita I found in another shopping arcade street another sewing shop, and this one's called Itoya, and it was a lot of fun to explore, but it was much smaller and the selection was a lot smaller. They did have some cool fabrics like traditional Japanese fabrics and kimono fabrics. They had patterns and they had really cool trimmings, for example, but I think that this shop was a little bit more for the occasional sewist or for getting into the craft, because they had a lot of kits, bag making and clothes making and things like that, and so they didn't have anything that I didn't find anywhere else, and so I didn't end up buying anything at that one. But if you are in Oita and you're not going to be visiting any of the other shops that I mentioned because you're not going to those regions of Kyushu, this one's still a pretty good address to have in mind, so I will link it below. So then we were back in Fukuoka for our very last evening before taking off very early the next morning to get back to Paris. And I was able to go back to the very first shop that I went to in Fukuoka in the first few days of our trip, called Toreyamu, and this time I let loose. I knew exactly how much of my budget was remaining and exactly how much space I had left in my suitcase, and so, it was a lot of fun. So I explored a little bit more of the shop. They have a lot of really interesting things. Especially, I almost bought a beading kit. I've never tried beading before, but they had a bunch of beading kits that looked really cool, but then I figured I'm not sure what I would do with it once I finished it, and I like for my embroidery projects to have use after, but I did buy a lot of other things, so let me show you. So the first notion that I picked out was this stitch guide. It is sticky on one side, so it sticks to your stitch plate rather than being magnetic, but I thought it would be interesting and nice to have something like this to help me with difficult seam allowances, so when they're not standard like 15 millimeters or 10 millimeters, which are typically what I use. Sometimes, yeah, it gets a little bit difficult, but I thought this was interesting. And then I also picked up this pattern. It's a yukata pattern, and at a lot of the hotels they had yukata for us to wear, and it was a lot of fun to wear and very relaxing and a lot less difficult to wear and to put together than a kimono, which is a lot more ornate and made of silk sometimes and has a lot more layers and complexity to it. Yukata are more casual, usually made out of cotton, and for the summertime or for relaxing at an onsen hotel, for example. And I've always wanted to maybe make one, and I know I can get this pattern here in Europe, but usually it's really hard to find for under 20 euros, and this one was sold for about 700 Japanese yen, which comes out to 4 euros, so I was like, oh, I must have it. Even though it's all in Japanese, I'm pretty sure I can figure it out with Google Translate or something similar. But yeah, now I can make my own yukata for me or my husband. So, hooray! And then the next purchases were all about this new sashiko hobby that I'd like to explore. They had these little kits of printed fabric, so apparently when you wash it, the lines disappear. And it's these sorts of patterns. So I got this one, which is sakura. I got this one, which is snowflakes. And then this one, which is sort of flowery, but also geometric. And then this one, which reminds me a lot more of folding paper and geometric Japanese designs. And so I got all 4 of these, and I don't intend to actually sew these fabrics. I think I'm going to use them more as stitching guides to trace, or patterns to trace onto fabrics with maybe a tracing wheel or something to save them. I'm not sure how yet. I think this one, for example, will be easier to do than this one, but we'll see. But I'd like to try it. And then I got some Sashiko thread. This, I think, would be easy to find also in Europe, but I thought it was how cool to buy it in Japan, and also it was a lot cheaper than buying it here. But yeah, some white thread, and then I got some pink for my Sakura ones, and then some blue in case I want to do it on white fabric, sort of contrasting. And yeah. So there's that. And then for my last purchase from this shop in Notions, I got this kit. It's Kogen embroidery, which is another embroidery method in Japan, and it looks really cool, and I'd really like to try it. And it's this sort of linen canvas pouch that you can make out of it, so then it would be useful after, and it comes with the whole kit, and I'm assuming instructions, otherwise I'll figure it out. But yeah, I want to try making that too. That was one of my year's resolutions, was to try and figure out how to get into that as well, so I'm excited to try that one out. And then for my very last purchase, I bought some fabric. And this is something that I didn't see the first time, but I found the second time and I decided to go for it. And it is this Neni Iro cotton voile, and it is silky smooth, and it looks like it has, is this the right side, wrong side? Yeah, right side. And it looks like it has watercolored flowers on it, and I find that to be just so beautiful. And so I'm thinking of making a really light summer blouse or something like that out of this one, and I think it's going to be soft and lovely and really nice against the skin, and perfect for the summertime, so I can't wait to sew that one too. So there you have it. Those are all of these shops that I found during my honeymoon in Kyushu, and I will link below in the description all of the titles and addresses of these shops in case you would like to go to them yourselves if you are planning a trip to Kyushu in Japan. If you are planning a trip to Japan, I wish you the best of travels, but also if you are thinking of visiting Japan one day, I highly encourage you to do so because I love going. As a visitor, I find that Japan is just a pleasure from a cultural and artistic point of view, but also nature and technology. But even more than that, I find that Japanese hospitality is the best or the nicest that I have ever experienced. I have never felt more welcome. People were typically very kind and patient, and so it was just a pleasure. And it has inspired me to keep learning Japanese. It was such a cool experience to once again be surrounded by the Japanese language and be able to hear it and hear the intonation and rhythm, and I really want to speak it better even though my baby Japanese needs a lot of work. And I think that it's also culturally, for me, what was the most interesting part of it is that there's this emphasis now on slow living and taking your time and paying attention to detail. And I find that the Japanese have already mastered that, and it's already a part of their way of life, or in commerce, or routine, or how they imagine relaxation as well. And it was just really cool to be able to slow down and take advantage of the way the different senses were highlighted in the different experiences offered by wherever we went, and it was just an amazing experience. And so yeah, I highly encourage it. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Arigatou gozaimasu. And I will see you again here soon with another video. Bye-bye.